giving it all these big clubs for nothing.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. You did right.
Full house.
Yep. Move that down out of the way. So every now and again it just disappears on me, so I have to. Right, just give me 2 secs, guys, and I'll just get this tweeting out, and then ready to go. Because I've got nobody to do it for me, so I have to do it all myself. So we'll do it in a second. I haven't got no one standing behind the back of me doing it for me or in another room.
You got 2 hands
there, don't we? We all feel your pain on that one. Usually on a Saturday in the cold.
Yeah, I know that feeling as well. Well, it could be worse. At least we're not. At least while it's football's stopped, we're not actually losing 10 games in a row. So I suppose that's a bonus.
Yeah, but with your new manager, you wouldn't have been losing 10 games in a row, would you?
No, probably not. Is that when you wanted me to take the 5th?
No. It was all positive for your club just before lockdown.
Make sure it's going on the others as well. Which it is on that one. And okie doke. So well, welcome to the D&K Reposs non-league show, and we're here for the next couple of hours. And of course, with me as usual, in a different place on my screen than normal, but he's down on the bottom left tonight on my screen. He's Keith. And how are you, mate? Yeah,
I'm not bad, Dave. Just sounds like my managerial career going further down the pan by the looks of things. If I move down the bottom, yeah, I'm all right. Not bad. My week don't sound as colourful as yours. I'll go there another day.
It's all good fun, But of course, also joining us tonight, and if you're watching, we're trying to go from my screen. He's Simon Cook, club secretary of BOGNOR REGIS, and welcome, Simon. And I think we've spoken.
Thanks very much.
I think we've actually spoken before. Actually, we've spoken to you on the program once before, of course, by phone. And then, of course, in top right is Roy Izzard from HITCHIN. So, welcome, Roy, and I hope you're okay.
Very well, thank you.
Good. And then in the middle, of course, is Scott, of course, from FROME Town and director of Dorset County FA. So we might have some questions firing you there from an FA point of view. You never know, you like Scott later on.
I've got one about Dorset.
Yeah. Always sunny in Dorset. That's all you need to know.
I've just booked with my mates who are on there. We're coming down to Ashley Manor to play golf.
Lovely.
There we go.
I hope everyone can get back to playing sport as soon as possible.
And of course, our star guest in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see down there, of course, he's Murray Toms, the director of Cheltenham. So welcome to you, Murray. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all. Everyone all right?
Yeah, not too bad, sir. Not too bad. Of course, you must be about the only person on the screen that's still playing.
Yeah, every 4 days. In fact, tomorrow is the only Tuesday, is the first Tuesday for a long, long time we don't actually have a game. So we've got a week off this week. So I'm actually, one of the few people who's sort of grateful for not having a game just at the moment.
So I was contacted a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a bit longer than that now, I think, by Scott to see if we could do a show on crowdfunding, and I think it's a good subject to be on, especially in the situation that, of course, everybody's in at the situation at the moment, money wise. And I know at my own club, and you think about stuff that dues that maybe could have been put on and not being put on, and losing that amount of money every week, and of course coming through the turnstiles. But I mean, talk to us a little bit about it, Scott, and sort of infill people that don't know about crowdfunding and how to go about it.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that's the stigma around what was with sort of crowdfunding a few years ago. And I think clubs are very aware of going to the same fan base to try and take money from them when they're already taking things off gate tickets, merchandise and other areas. So how do you sort of look at going beyond that? And I think hopefully you'll hear tonight some wonderful stories, obviously FROME, HITCHIN, BOGNOR, and a few more that Murray will share as well. But it's how actually you work with the wider community. And I think it's the engagement that you get from it. So when people look at crowdfunding, it's much more than what we'd say like a bucket shake or just donations. It's really how can you sort of engage with your fans. And well, just using FROME as an example, we saw it straight away. We run a crowdfunder just at the end of last season to save the club. We brought in £20,000, which is what we needed to clear the debts and make it through the summer pretty much. And we suddenly saw the upturn in attendances. We saw the upturn in like literally the amount of people that would open emails, everything, social media follow, everything went up and everyone was engaged. And it's just a shame that this season's been curtailed. But I think it's more just getting everyone back in, because we know what it's like at these sort of leagues. It's actually really difficult to go up and it's quite difficult to go down. Although, so we managed that a couple of years ago. It's just finding that way of why people turn up. It's for the communities around these clubs.
I mean, do clubs, do clubs itself though? I mean, is it something that clubs, do you find that clubs actually do that on a regular basis, or is it just some clubs just do it as a one-off, or do clubs actually do that as a, maybe like as you said with FROME, you did it last season. Is it something that you've looked at again for this season as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always a consideration, but I think it goes around to what actually the club needs and what it wants to achieve. I mean, you've got different examples, whether that's something to sort of put something in the ground or like to fix a problem that's happened. So if you've had some sort of disaster or someone's broken in and destroyed something, or those kind of causes where would normally vote donations. But actually, I think what clubs are looking for it now is to achieve things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to achieve, because we all know that money's tight. Directors, especially sort of steps 2 and below, they're putting all their money in to fund the wage bills and fund actually the operations of the club. So how do you get better seating, better signage, all those things that you want, better scoreboard, those sort of, how do they come about, especially when sponsorship becomes harder and harder? And actually what you see with sponsors coming on board with crowdfunders, it's actually bringing them more out of the woodwork, because they can really see what's going on and actually think, I'm now going to engage with a crowd. I'm not just sticking a pitch side board up. I'm actually doing something that all of these fans, whether it's 200 fans or 2,000 fans that are backing a campaign, they can see that my company's actively help to do. And that might even be from a smaller donation than it is to buy shirt sponsorship. So actually from a company point of view, it makes much more sense as well.
I mean, Simon, was your crowdfunding to do with your stand? Am I right in saying you've got a new stand in there in Bognor?
Partly. Like many clubs, well, like all clubs, I'm sure at our level, we could always do with more money. And with the beginning of the coronavirus situation, at that stage, we didn't realize quite how serious it was going to get. We were concerned about the future. And if I remember correctly, I think Scott and Murray had approached the Isthmian League. It was very much taken on board as something to recommend to the clubs, and we got it from the Isthmian League. We started putting things together, and initially, to be honest, as a club, we were a little bit cautious. We didn't want to be seen to be going out begging from our supporters when we weren't in a critical situation. But it was incredible how quickly it was embraced, and we had a small team of 4 or 5 people who were really passionate and really got behind it, and we decided to go with it, and it was a great success. We actually raised through crowdfunder about £50,500, which was probably twice what we thought we might get, and since it closed, we probably brought in another 4,000 or 5,000. So we reckon we've made between 55 and 56,000 as a result of this. But I'd echo what Scott said. It was incredible how quickly we engaged with the local community. We had people contacting the club or donating and buying things. There's one story, we had a guy from Holland who bought a team shirt and gave us a £50 donation. And he had once been to Bognor about 10 years ago, visiting someone, and had been taken to a game. And on the back of that one visit, he had become a Bognor supporter. We never knew him, but for the last 10 years living in Holland, he's been following Bognor and decided to join in. We had people from Australia, the United States, other parts of the world who were sort of long forgotten Bognor supporters who joined in. And we had ex-players. We had one ex-player who donated 500 quid. He wanted to remain anonymous, so we've never mentioned it, never mentioned his name. But we took this money, and as you say, David, we were in the process of building a new main stand, which was a fairly major project. And we thought that this might just help us to, finish off things nicely. But to be honest, we actually used money in the end to build a further covered cover over one of the terraces behind the goal. So we've got a lovely new stand and a very smart cover over the width of one end of the ground. And that was largely paid for by the crowdfunder experience. So, it was a great opportunity. We'd be hesitant about doing it again too soon, to be honest, because we wouldn't want to be seen to be just trying to milk the same people time after time after time. But I'm sure at some stage in the future, we would certainly want to do it again.
Just, Scott and Murray, I mean, with that, I mean, how does if a club was watching this tonight and they were looking at doing that, how do they sort of go about it? What's the first sort of steps that the clubs need to do to actually move forward with a crowdfunder?
Scott, shall I go?
Go on, Murray.
I think, quite simply, the first port of call really is to drop myself or Scott a line. We sort of take great pleasure in sort of meeting clubs face to face and sort of helping them to shape what they need out of a crowdfunder. The platform itself is a bit of a sort of Swiss Army knife of fundraising, really. There are sort of several ways that you can create a campaign around what it is you actually need to raise money for. It's not always, obviously the driving force is normally cash, but it is a, it is a really effective community engagement tool too. So you don't necessarily need to come into this thinking you need money either. That is a useful byproduct, but actually I think the most sort of, the good thing about it is the sort of the story that it creates. And so I think myself and Scott, we normally speak to clubs. We normally jump on a Zoom call. We normally spend an hour or so just trying to understand what the sort of key aims are of a campaign, and then we'll sort of help shape them. I mean, from that point, we would invite people to sort of jump on our platform. We've got a range of coaching material, support material, education material that kind of allows people to go away and sort of dig as deep as they want to into sort of best practice and how it all works. I think we've got an online learning platform now. We've got a team of coaches. So we normally, after a chat with us, we normally sort of say to people to go away, set up an account, begin to sketch out a page and, get it to a certain point. And again, myself and Scott quite happily have a look at that and feed back into it. And, there's a sort of difference between just kind of telling a story or explaining why you need some money and actually creating a campaign that engages people from when they first arrive at the page. So, we're quite involved like that, and it's been really successful. And certainly the sort of volume of projects that have come, football projects rather, that have come through our platform, and the amount raised and the stories and the coverage that it all has had is kind of testament to that. So yeah, in the first instance, I would say contact us. We'll have a chat. We'll point you in the right direction. We'll help you sort of make a start, and then we will tell you, how you could potentially tweak it for sort of maximum kind of effect. With all of these things, it's very true, not just of football nor sport but anything across our platform. We normally find that projects inspire projects, So as much as myself and Scott think we're good, it's actually other projects that inspire people to sort of greater success. You know, the amount of times I've heard people talk about the Hitchin campaign or the Bognor Regis Town campaign, that they're talked about by other clubs, they're noticed by other clubs, and you know, people kind of see the success that they've had and sort of recognise that there's an opportunity to sort of go about it themselves. So yeah, so in the first port of call, drop us a line, we'll have a chat, we'll explain it. Sometimes we don't need to sort of go too much into it. Sometimes we sort of spend a bit longer sort of explaining it in a bit more detail for people who might not have come across it. It's still relatively new, even though we've been doing it for about a decade. So, but it's still relatively new to a lot of people. And the pandemic, I guess, forced a different way of thinking. And yeah, I guess 12 months on from that point, here are we sort of explaining, you know, just how effective a tool it has been.
With that, David, I would say that realistically, setting up a page it's easier than setting up like an eBay post or something like that. You go on, there's about 7 little mini screens you have to fill in with your details, and you just push go and you're live. Obviously, what we try to do is try and get in the way of those people pushing the button live, so that we can help them build their project to maximize or refocus what they're looking at. And often people will say, oh, you just want to try and get people to earn as much money or whatever it is through. We don't, to be honest. We try to make it as realistic as possible, because often when people choose sort of outrageously high totals, then they've got no chance of achieving them. They need to build it up. Crowdfunding is all about engagement. It's getting people to be on there, and every person that donates, it's not a donation. It's actually joining part of that crowd, and how do you inspire them to tell the next person and go forward? So it's working as much. I mean, I'm sure both Roy and Simon will talk to you about, or say how easy they found the process of signing up. But the actual long and short of it is, it's actually really simple. But we would always say, think about it, consult with your fans, consult with the directors, speak to your sponsors, see what's there, test things out before doing it. And what really makes a difference, which I'm surprised Murray didn't mention, is it's just the difference in like using a typical donation site. So when you look at other sites, and I won't name them, but typically the average donation is around sort of £13-14. With majority of the football projects we run, I think it's £72 is the average donation that comes in per person. So when you start looking at that difference, it's absolutely huge. And when me and Murray sit on our calls, we always tentatively say it's around £50, just so we can sort of manage expectations. But yeah, our data shows it's £72 at the moment. And obviously that's averaged off, because some people will donate £5, some people will donate £10, but others won't. They'll come in, they'll pledge £1,000, or a company will come in and put £5,000 on, whatever it is. Then you're looking at those different areas. But what the platform does offer is this basis of rewards. And what we've seen with some of the projects in Bognor and Worthing down the road from them, as well as Hitchin done, when they're doing things like stand developments, it's kind of like putting a name on the wall. So fans aren't just putting a £5 in, they're putting £50 in to have their name on the side of a stand till that stand falls down, or the sign disappears or whatever. And the whole host of different things that clubs have been going through. And Murray's a fantastic example of seeing what he's done at Cheltenham. And you can actually see him, if you can see on his screen behind him, on the Murray, I don't know if you got one, you can see him over his shoulder, with his children, the cardboard cutouts that Cheltenham did all across the grounds. And we've seen virtual ticketing over the last weekend with Sunderland, and that raising hundreds of thousands of pounds. So whatever level you're at, there's a way on crowdfunding to actually do it. It's a phenomenally powerful tool.
Are you surprised? I mean, do you know what figures you say you spoke to the Isthmian League about it, before? I mean, are you surprised that, also, should I say, first question I suppose should be, do you know how many people actually took that up? Clubs from our league actually took it up, and if it was only a bare minimum, are you surprised that more clubs haven't taken it up?
So at Crowdfunder, they've got partnerships with the National League, Southern League, Isthmian League, Northern League, and I'll get all the Scottish ones wrong, but yeah. And then sort of as you go down the divisions as well. And basically the offer from Crowdfunder to all of those leagues was right at the start, and something that they're still offering, is that 0% platform fees, and we was 0% on the transaction fees at the start of the crisis as well. So knowing that clubs could come on, do their fundraising and keep every single penny of what they raised was a huge incentive, and obviously saw that sort of take off. But I think what we've broken through, and where time will take it, is that the stigma that I mentioned at the start is starting now to go away. Because I know a number of managers and directors that would say, no, I don't want my club to be that club, or I don't want my club to do that. But actually, when you start to see the other clubs that are doing it, and when you start to think about what they're actually looking to achieve, if the fans are there and the fans are willing, and you've got the fan buy-in, and when we say fans, it goes beyond that to supporters and sponsors and anyone in the community that's looking to make a difference, because that's what it is. The football clubs should be the heart and home of every community, and that's what it is. It's living up to that. So if in Frome's case, if Frome disappeared, all the charities, all the organisations that use the buildings on a weekday, all the people that come to the games for free that we give out tickets to, that have got social isolation problems and all those sort of areas, and disabilities, and the teams that are associated and beyond that, all of that disappears if the club disappears. And that was a case in point for Frome, that there was a change in the board, and it just came at that point where the money just was needed right then and there. So we had to do it in 28 days to raise 20 grand. I mean, the board thought that we'd raise about 4 or 5. That's how confident they were in it. But we smashed past that. We didn't even set the target at that, because it was irrelevant. The target had to be 20 grand, because that's the amount of money the club needed.
So when you set the when you set the page up, so say for instance, my club Harlow come to you tomorrow and say, look, can you help us set the page up? They set the page up. How does that then, is it down then to the club to sort of like share that through social media and phone up companies and that sort of side of it? Or is it just something it's on a site you can't share, and you just push people towards the site? So does the club, and I suppose it's a good question for Simon and as well, and for Roy, how did you then get that message out there that you've got crowdfunding and you need that crowdfunding? Is it, how did you go about that?
Well, if I sort of explain how we went about it, I mean, right at the beginning, of course, the support from Crowdfunder and the guidance, as Scott has already talked about, was tremendous, and it made it very easy for somebody as lacking in IT skills as myself to do our bit to get it all set up. And then once everything was set up, we're fortunate that we had a guy who is very focused on social media. He put together a campaign which really got it out there into the marketplace. He was extremely active. It went out and was followed up regularly. And of course, people start sharing it very quickly. And it just spread like wildfire. We also, I think, benefited. I don't know how many other clubs have done it, Scott, to be honest, but we had a guy who put together a very short video. I think it was one of the things you recommended, is having a video, if I remember correctly. And it was a short, sharp video, which lasted from memory about 40 seconds, but it was quite emotive, had some nice music attached to it. And we had a title for our campaign. Our club nickname is the Rocks, because we're obviously on the seashore, and there's a set of rocks off the shore which are known as Bognor rocks. So we called the campaign "You Are Our Rocks," which was a sort of play on how supportive our supporters are, and of course with the sort of local community. And that really took off. And with the video being shared across goodness knows how many other platforms, the local press picked it up and ran with it, and it almost sort of fueled itself. And probably like the experience you had at Frome, Scott, the moment the first purchase or donation came in, we got excited, and it happened within about 5 minutes, I think, of us going live. And day by day, of course, the reports that if I remember correctly, we got back from the crowdfunder program or the page, we were sharing each day saying how much we've raised. And the more we raised, the more we seemed to raise. It seemed to sort of just motivate more and more people. And I thought it would slow down after a while, and it did. It had an initial surge, slowed down slightly, and then just kept rising and rising again, which really surprised us, to be honest. But I think the key was just making sure you got someone who has the knowledge and wherewithal to really get it out there into the social media community and keep pushing.
Shall we give the Hitchin experience?
Yeah, go on, right.
Well, first of all, Murray and Scott have been very, very modest in what they're saying. We would be their #1 supporter and recommend every single club takes crowdfunder on board. I said straight, how Hitchin got involved in it is a really peculiar way, really, and it's down to the sort of person I am. I'd seen that a crowdfunder had reached agreement with the Southern League not to have any charges, and wearing my treasurer's hat, that always excites me when I see no charges, so I was quite impressed by that. And Royston Town are our near neighbours and very good competitors. They're a very tough team to play at the moment, and so I tend to follow their Twitter feed. And I noticed they'd entered into a crowdfunder agreement, and I'd already read about crowdfunder reaching agreement with Southern League, so I thought, well, I'll see what happens here. And day by day, I was looking at their website, and they seemed to be getting more and more money, and I was getting more and more jealous, if I'm honest, thinking, we're a bigger club than Royston, we shouldn't let them raise all this money and us sit back and do nothing. And in the end, I think they raised £25,345, which, a club with not a massive fan base, I thought was a fantastic achievement. Genuinely, I'd take my hat off to them, but because I'd seen this, my colleague Chris Newbold, who's our admin secretary and fixture secretary, I kept on to him, Chris, we've got to have a look at this crowdfunder. If Royston can do it, surely Hitchin can. I had a word with our manager as well, saying, Royston are doing it, I don't want us to be left out. And eventually, Chris did make contact with Murray and Scott. I think I'd worn him down. And from day one, once he spoke to them, he came back to me and said, they're fantastic. They were so helpful. All his questions were answered. And Chris, I think, might have been a bit dubious in the first instance, having spoken to them, was totally sold on the idea. And they came up with a lot of very good suggestions on the best way to run the programme. Particularly, don't rely on one person, it's too big. You need 4 or 5 individuals to get involved, to share the load. And we used our social media team immediately. And they are, I mean, I'm a dinosaur in that field, but they are absolutely spot on. And for the moment we signed up to it, boy, do they get the message out using every form of social media, Instagram, etc. We tried to get the message out to players who we knew had big followings, just using every trick in the book to make sure that our crowdfunder message got out. But I say, we very much adhered to what Murray and Scott had suggested. And funnily enough, a lot of the things they said would happen absolutely did, in the same way that Bognor found. First, you have a real surge at the beginning. And in fact, we set our target at 25,000. And again, like Bognor, we thought, well, we're not going to get anywhere near it. We've got to set a target. We might as well come up with something. And I'll come back to how we got that figure anyway. But in the first 2 days, we got 9,000. By the end of the first week, we got 17.5. And by the end of week 2, we'd broken the target. No, we're sort of in club cuckoo lands here. This can't happen to us. So we had to extend the target. And we thought, well, what do? We might as well go for 50. We're not going to get it, but let's go for it anyway. But exactly as Murray and Scott had warned us, weeks 4 and 5, it slowed right down. We began to think, oh, what's happening here? But they'd warned us it would happen. But then they say on the last week, you'll probably find you'll have a surge. And suddenly, in that last week, it did go mad. And we ended up with a figure of 61,000, which I think Murray and Scott have told me is the best that a non-league club have done. But to say, a lot of that is due to their professionalism, their advice. Everything they've said worked out. All the recommendations they made have helped us, like offering rewards for different sizes of donations. That was an excellent idea and certainly helped other people get on board. So any club out there, these two guys will really make it easy for you. Their advice is proven absolutely correct. We're 61,000 richer because of it.
Is it a 6?
Scott, go on, sorry, Dave.
No, go on, mate. Go on. Go on.
Scott, just we've obviously, all these from step 2 down to step 6 or even step 7. I'd say 60-70% of them clubs sort of have small fan bases, and I'm sort of saying an average of 60-70 people through the gate. And I can only put like my devil's advocate out on where people would go, well, I don't look at things like crowd failure or they're thinking of as just giving as well, because we've only got 60-70 people. Are we wasting our time? Are we wasting their time? Is this for clubs like that as well? And if it is, what would you say to a chairman or a secretary listening now? How they can get some sort of funds for their club with that sort of size fan base? Because I would say that's an average of a club around sort of step 4, I would say, to 5, maybe.
What I would say to it is you're going to get a lot of people donating who aren't part of that fan base. You might only get 60 or 70 watching, but of the people who donated to ours, I'm sure probably over 100 of them don't come to the ground. But they follow our results. We had some, like Bognor, we had some from overseas. They had no idea who they were. They just had some connections to the club through their parents, whatever. They might have watched a game many years ago. So don't be scared by the fact you might have a small number of people actually come through the turnstiles. It doesn't mean your wider fan base won't be much, much bigger.
Just with a silly example of that. So at Frome, we had an example where our captain's best friend was the regional sales manager for NatWest. And so his branches he looked after were Frome, which he had no allegiance to other than his friend playing for the club, and in Bristol and in Weston-super-Mare, so all that direction. He took it upon himself, and he went round to all of the NatWest staff who just started to donate towards it, and he raised £1,700 towards Frome's thing from members of NatWest. That I can't say it's from NatWest because they didn't donate it as a company, but from the staff of NatWest. And it's like, well, where on earth would that come from? Unless you're sort of going out, unless you're reaching. And I think going back to your question of clubs both sides, absolutely, that's kind of the core of where crowdfunding. You can sit there and say, oh, look, Wigan have raised £1 million on crowdfunder, or Sunderland have raised 200,000, or whatever it is. That they've got numbers, they've got fans, they'll get 30, 40, 50,000 people through the gate. But no, a larger thing of what Murray and I are looking at is that step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, that sort of area, because that's kind of where the community comes in more. That's where it makes up more things. You've got the people in there. But where it is, sorry, Murray, it's just taking those 70 people and say to them, actually, we don't really, if you want to donate, that's fine. But better than donating is telling as many people as you can.
That definitely happens. It's amazing the wildfire effect, once it gets out there, how it grows and grows and grows. Mm-hmm. And another thing we did was, as a sort of advice for anyone else who tries it on, is obviously we use all the social media outlets, but we then also try to make a media impression. So you use your local paper. They did a couple of very good stories for us. We got into the non-league paper. They did a good story for us. One of our social media guys managed to get onto the Colin Murray show on Radio 5. And the interesting thing was there, the feature on us followed a feature on Lionel Messi, which I always thought to have Hitchins to follow Messi was a great thing for our credibility. I also, just out of the blue, approached our local BBC regional news programme and said, we've got a great human interest story here, because we'd had a couple of excellent things that happened. We had a 5-year-old who wanted to do a sponsored walk for the club. And this was at the time when Colonel Tom was the major news story. So he was 100, our lad was 5, and he agreed to 25 laps of top field, our ground, to raise, he hoped to get 500. He ended up getting 2,200. By mentioning him to this BBC regional programme, I also said that our commercial manager, who unfortunately died during the year, he'd been working, he was 90 and still working for the club, and his family made a very large donation to crowdfund in memory of him, and another family made a donation on behalf of their dad, who'd been a keen volunteer. His the family sponsored the 2 dugouts for him and his wife, who have been long suffering because of his football connection. So these human interest stories, I said, you've got to cover our crowdfunding story, because it's the sort of thing that local news programs should cover. And sure enough, they sent someone down. So again, that gave us a lot of extra publicity, and it all helped keep the pot boiling to get further donations. So if you're cute and you try things, you get knocked back on certain times. You're not going to get everything you want. You make phone calls, nothing happens, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. And as I say, Radio 5, BBC, non-league paper, etc., just through trying things out. So yeah, you never know what you can achieve. It's amazing. When we first started, the reason we did it, funny enough, I don't know if our ground is fairly famous because it's wooden terracing, and one of the few in the country with wooden terracing. But our grounds team had actually done a survey of the ground to see what essential work needed doing. It absolutely horrified us that we costed the things that had to be done. And we knew we had a ground grading visit coming up as well, which we only just scraped through last time because they hate the wood on the ground. So we know we're always up against it. And we valued the work that desperately needed doing at about 25 grand, which is why we decided to go for that through crowdfunding, because coincided with the pandemic, so all our income streams had disappeared overnight. So it was really the only way we could go, because we couldn't fund it ourselves. But it meant then that our ground is very popular with people because of its uniqueness. So the fact that the money was going to be all put towards the ground and doing the essential work that we had to have done to have any chance of passing our grading visit that we knew was coming up at the end of the season, that really helped us as well. So hopefully there's some advice there for other clubs, but whatever you do, these 2 guys are really great. As I say, I can't speak highly enough of them, and they're not paying me to say this. They genuinely were really helpful, and as I say, I'll forever be grateful to them. I actually wrote them a very long letter of appreciation and said that they could send it out to other clubs happily, because genuinely what I've said is absolutely true.
Can I just come in and echo a couple of points that Roy made? I think they're invaluable. The thanks to Scott and Murray are tremendous, because I would agree exactly with everything you say, Roy. The other thing I think is that it sounds as if Hitchin did pretty much what we did, in as much as we made it clear right from the outset that anything we raised would not be frittered away on players' wages or whatever.
Absolutely.
It would be used to benefit the supporters by investing in the quality of the ground and the facilities. And I'm sure that helped people's preparedness to donate money.
We also sort of took it upon ourselves to say that as and when the money is spent, we would give a full report on where the money had gone. And as each improvement's been made, we're very quick to let people know what's happening, and where things have been delayed, because sometimes things take a lot of planning before the actual work can be done. We actually warn them that it's not going to happen overnight, but don't worry, your money hasn't been frittered on players' wages. It is going to be used for the tasks that we said it would be. And so again, I'd say to any club who does do it, you must be very open, because don't try and cheat the public. If they've supported you, you've got to go along with their wishes and make sure it's spent on the things you say it's going to be spent on.
I think just adding on to that, you need to know your fan base as quickly as you can and understand them and test it. And that's why Murray and I would always say, take your page, take your rewards, show it to a handful of fans before you do it and see what happened. I mean, we've talked about the rewards, but that could be anything. And we know that when people come to donate, that if you're going in with a kind of, oh, I'm going to give them 20 quid or I'm going to give them 50 quid or whatever it is, typically most people will come in with a value that they're looking to donate. So what the rewards allow you to do is kind of tease that person into potentially spending a little bit more. So if you've got, we wouldn't normally say, I'll put like a £10 reward or put something like that, because if someone's coming to pledge £10, then it's likely they'll do it. If you're trying to get those people that might go, oh, actually, no, that'd be nice to have my name on the wall for 50 quid, I'll do that. And obviously it starts to add up and you start to create that thing and it gives you more things to shout about. But I think it's really sort of looking at how you do it. And going back to your point, Keith, about clubs, that sort of size, what the tool allows you to do as well, which I don't think Hitchin or Bognor used for my knowledge, is there's like fundraising on there. So you can actually have your main page for the club, and then anyone can go and set up a fundraiser, whether they want to run 10 miles or they want to do 200 push-ups or whatever they want to do, and raise money from their families and friends. And that money doesn't get, they don't have to touch the money. It goes straight through them, straight onto your bank account, to your bank, well, the club's bank account details. So effectively, I mean, Murray's working with 2 clubs at the moment, Bishop Cleeve and Glossop, that are in that kind of sort of territory that you're talking about, sort of 5, 6, that sort of territory. And they're both raised over sort of 20, 25 grand on both of them at the moment. And they've got like 16, 17 of these fundraisers each on it, where all the youth teams, so like the under 9s, the under 10s, all that, are out there to go and raise whatever they can. And it's all going towards getting them new pitch facilities. So it'll benefit the whole town through. So those clubs, when you get to the smaller level, normally most of them have got a tie into youth teams. And actually it becomes a really, really strong weapon into sort of fundraising.
It's utterly compelling when it works, and it's brilliant to hear the stories of success. Not because like you're talking nicely about us, I should add, but I mean when we set this tool up about 10 years ago, when we set it up about 10 years ago, we genuinely set it up because we wanted to sort of make a difference in communities. When the pandemic struck, it was an opportunity for myself and Scott to sort of, it's a labour of love for us, really, and you know, and we're in a good position to help clubs, and you know, and the results have been really good, and that's but everybody's sort of said all the things that I would say far more eloquently than I ever could. It is all about momentum. Well, in the first place, it's just about an idea. I wouldn't think of it as crowdfunding. It's just an idea, and through a crowdfunding tool, your community will validate that idea. It might be that you set up a campaign and the community just doesn't react at all to it. But that comes into what Scott was talking about in knowing your audience. You'll have a good idea that your fan base is going to react positively to it. So that idea gets validated through pledges of money. And then that total starts to go up. And again, I think, Roy, you talked about the momentum. That's where the magic is in crowdfunding. When that momentum takes hold, it's so compelling. You're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've been there a million times myself. I'm looking at the numbers at 3 o'clock in the morning, just because it's just such an addictive thing.
You become very sad in checking, I have to say.
Well,
you can't stop yourself doing it. You really
absolutely.
can't.
But it
particularly when you're getting near to a target, it gets even worse because you're saying, "Come on, let's get it over that target."
We've all been there, and you know, and I also recognise the scepticism, because I know when at Cheltenham, when I did a first crowdfunder, we wanted to put an electronic scoreboard in the corner of the ground at a cost of about £45,000. I remember on the night before, I remember that our chairman at the time, is no longer the chairman now, Paul Baker. He bet me £1,000 to the crowdfunder that it just simply wouldn't work. It wouldn't get anywhere near it. And within 9 days, we'd raised 70 grand because of that momentum, not because we're a big club. Again, I can give you examples. One a week ago where Salford City, they went to Wembley, won their first major trophy. They set up a virtual ticketing campaign, as did the 3 other finalists. So all 4 finalists set up these virtual ticketing campaigns. David Beckham pushed their campaign to his 65 million Instagram followers. And in total, they raised £630. So that shows you sort of like, you know, you can have David Beckham tweeting about you to 65 million people, but it doesn't convert. It doesn't convert. Whereas Bishop's Cleeve in Step 5, who I'm working with now, they are on the verge of going through £20,000 as we speak. I mean, I'm literally checking the numbers, Roy, right as we're talking. You know, we're on the verge of going through the target, and that is because of this idea that our platform is a bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can what they've done really well, as have Glossop right now, is they've used this multiplier, as we call it, but it allows people to go away and do something and raise a little bit of money towards the total. And Cleeve have got about 15 of those at the moment, and they've all got between £200, £300 and £600, £700. And what they're all doing is they're doing like a fancy dress bike ride, or they're running a marathon, or they're running John O'Groats to Land's End collectively as a group of under nines, and they're doing those things. But what that's quite how that's effective is not because what they're doing is that they're then turning around to their social networks, their colleagues, their connections, and they're asking for support from them. Now, half of those people won't really have a connection at that moment with the football club, but what it's doing is it's starting to sort of draw support from everywhere. We always think of it rather crudely as an onion ring. You start in the middle, and right in the middle is like those sort of 70 fans who pay to come and watch every game. But then you go out to sort of friends and family and people that come maybe 5 times a season. Then maybe you go out and it's the fan that turns up every 5 years when there's a bigger FA Cup game. And then you go out there and there's people that have sort of stopped coming or haven't come before, and you need to engage them. There was another point about now being able to tap into support nationally and internationally. It's about opening new audiences, and and you'll find people like Cheltenham Town have found that, okay, we're League 2 at the moment, but we've suddenly grown in the last 12 months through some crowdfunding, a national and international fan base, and it's sort of, it wasn't, we wouldn't have got to them really otherwise, without doing this. So it's quite compelling for that, and the byproduct is, yes, you got the money at the end of the campaign. There's the money, you can go and do the thing. But you've suddenly got this re-energized community, this reconnected community, and suddenly people sort of have this. I mean, I remember that we helped Newquay sort of raise around £10,000 for something they were doing, and they were actually struggling a bit in the hundreds, and we kind of gave them a little bit of advice. And they said something recently about now they just got this appetite to they believe they can do things, and they understand how these tools can work to help them. And so there is a legacy of creating digital skills in places where sometimes they don't have any. Some projects begin some of these projects begin without a sort of social media person or a filmographer or whatever it is. And they end up by the end of it realizing that they understand how these tools work a little bit better. So it's a good legacy, and it's a change in mindset. It's around a more sustainable future about how things can be done when people come together. That is the thrust of what we do at Crowdfunder, not just in football or in sport. But and also in the example of Cleves, sorry, they engage. They've had loads of conversations with local businesses. Again, there's new ones that have become involved. There's old ones that went away and have returned, and they offered rewards to kind of put through the campaign. And what that allowed supporters to do, and not just necessarily football supporters of the club, it enabled them to sort of pledge money towards this idea. So they could show their support with money. They received a fish and chip dinner from the local chippy for £5. It might cost sort of £8 or £9 normally. And then they can go down and support their local chippy too. So you're supporting your local club, you're supporting your local businesses. Everybody's getting something out of that situation. So it's an environment where everybody wins. So it's not that online bucket shake, and it's not what I always say is it's so much more than just giving. It's so much more than that. It's not a bucket shake. So all of those things have been said, and there are they've been said far better than I could say it. But
yeah, I think Murray with Newquay is a great example. So yeah, they came onto the site, and that literally was a donation-led campaign. They just wanted to raise money. They were somewhere in the hundreds, and they didn't speak to us before, so it kind of flagged up in our system, there's a football club. So Murray and I rang them, and then it was looking at it to say, well, they sort of hit right where you said, Keith. They get circa 100 fans, that kind of territory through, maybe a little bit more at times, but that kind of average. And what they didn't realise that through the crowdfunding tool as well is that crowdfunder, as Murray said, is a Swiss Army knife. There's extra funding available through the site as well, depending on what's on the site and who crowdfunder are partnering with. So currently there's a big Sport England one. So you can get up to sort of 10 grand for Sport England, but it's a little bit more difficult for football clubs because it needs to be sort of public owned or fan owned, that kind of territory through, because they're trying to do, or helping multiple sports, which when you get down to step 5, step 6, sometimes there are better tie-ins with cricket clubs and rugby clubs associated with it. So you can kind of put a good case to Sport England. And then if you raise 10 grand, they're going to stick another 10 grand on top and you've got 20 grand. But also there's a number of other little sites that's in there, like with British Cycling and all these, or local LEPs. And the British Cycling ones to try and get more people riding. So even if you start like, oh, we're going to start a bike club that rides from the club and starts at the club. If you're encouraging more people to cycle, there's ways that you can get those additional funds. And you can see it that just where you're based in the country, if it's something to do with helping the community or helping climate or anything like that, if you're putting a solar stand in or something like that, there's so many things there where the money can be kind of boosted up. And what's great about it is that they can just all add together. So you don't apply for just one fund. You can apply for however many you qualify for, and then see whether you get it. And Newquay, I think they got local one from Newquay Council, and they got it from Sport England. And Murray will put me right on it, but I think of their 10 grand, is it 4 grand of that came from?
Yeah, I think of their 10, I think they received a 4,000 pledge from Sport England and a £250 pledge from their local community, Cornwall Council. So we've got relationships with over 40 local authorities around the country. Most recently, Salford this morning, I believe we launched that. And all of those pots of money exist. So our vision as a business is that a crowd around a football club, for example, will come together and validate a good idea through crowdfunding. So, either one of the two we've heard tonight. But our vision is that, yes, supporters can pledge £25, receive a reward, be part of the project. But we believe our extra funding partners, and we're growing them. We do have quite a few, but we grow those so that basically the amount of money raised by the crowd, so the £61,000 at Hitchin, that in our theory would get matched by tens of thousands of pounds from local partners, big brands, all sorts of people, so that pot becomes bigger and bigger. So that's the vision of what we're trying to do at Crowdfunder, and yes, and that really worked at Newquay. They had 2 extra funding partners, and almost 50% of it come from them.
What we're also seeing, like Football Foundation, when you're applying for grants for them, they're looking for more validation now on why your ideas are actually worthwhile. Why should they put 80% of the project money in, or however much they put in? So when clubs are looking at it, it's saying, well, if you've got to make up the final 25% yourselves, you can do that through using a crowdfunding tool and show that 200 people also agree that this is worthwhile doing. So it ticks the box for the Football Foundation and other organisations like that too.
Can I say one other interesting thing I found about Crowdfunder is when people make donations, they're able to leave a message on the site. And a lot of the messages were left makes you realise how important a non-league club is to its community. I'll actually read you what one of our fans said, and I think you'll understand what I mean. Attending matches with my grandfather in the early 1970s helped me develop a love for the game, and also was the start of a lifetime support for HITCHIN FC. While not able to attend regularly for much of the last 2 decades, I always eagerly look out for results on the Saturday afternoon. I wish HCSC and its officials much success in keeping a great club alive for future generations to enjoy as much as I have. Now, when you hear a message like that, then you realise that, and we had a lot of similar messages where a particular fan, his grandfather, his father, first forcing along. So you've got that connection to the club that goes back generations. And you've got a chap who hasn't even able to go to games anymore now, but he still follows it and he wants the club to succeed for future generations to watch. And I think that just shows that non-league clubs are still a key part of the local community. And when I see messages like that, I feel quite humble actually, and makes me proud to be involved in my club and wants me to carry on working for it. So it's not just the money itself, it's when you see things like that, it's quite choking really.
Yeah, it's really powerful, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of messages like that, and there are loads left on a daily basis about everything, but yeah, certainly football clubs. I've seen it with Cleve, where former players, now their lads are in the under-8 sort of thing, that there's that connection to the community. So it is powerful. And actually I quite like Art working up those kind of quotes, because they're great little bits of social media content, because that reminds other people, just how important it is. That's a really effective way of communicating to everybody just how important it is, that you can become complacent about these organizations and these institutions, and just in that moment in time, I think, you know, it comes into focus why people sort of care about them, why they're sort of worth like looking after, and why, you know, and why we have to think differently about how we go about the business of it a little bit.
Absolutely. And win, lose or draw, you know, people are following your results. I mean, at Hitchin, expectations have generally been low over the years. We haven't been one of the most successful. We're trying to get better, but we don't have expectations of expecting to win the league. But the first thing is have the club there for future generations. That's more important than anything else. And when you see messages like that, you know you're doing the right thing to make sure the club is sustainable. And if fans' donations help you to become even more sustainable and to do the jobs you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, everyone's a winner.
So did Hitchin and Bognor, did you guys actually give the people something back, a bit like what Marionette was saying about packs and stuff? Did you actually give some type of reward? And if so, what sort of reward did you give back to your people that donated to the crowdfunder?
I come up with, I'm sure it must have been the same with Roy at Hitchin, but we brainstormed and also looked at best practices at other clubs to get other ideas, and we had people who just donated, obviously, but the point that Scott made earlier on, whereby if somebody's going to donate 20 quid, perhaps encourage them to buy something, which means their donation actually goes up to 40 or 50 pounds because they're getting something else in return. The obvious one, which was a great success, was a plaque. So for 50 pounds, they can say what they like on the plaque, and in most cases it just says the name, but in certain cases people will have bought them for their grandfather who used to come at the ground, and there's a little bit about the grandfather, for example. And I think we sold, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers now, but I think we sold 162 of these plaques at 50 quid each, so that's 8 odd grand. The plaques actually cost us £7 each to create, so you know there's a profit there of £43 per plaque. We followed another club who had embroidered your name. So if David Square wanted to donate £21, your name would be embroidered into the first team playing kit. And again, we had over 100, I think it was about 120 people who have done that. So our playing kit for last season that's just finished, and it will be used again this season because it was such a truncated season, has everybody's name, and it's repeated many times. It goes around in relatively small print, but it looks really good. Everybody's names embroidered in the first team kit. And then we thought, well, we'll come up with some big opportunities, which we may just be lucky with. You know, we put one in for £15,000 for ground naming rights for 3 years. We had a couple of companies who contacted us and discussed it, but actually nobody actually did buy it in the end. But you know, you may as well put those in the hope that somebody does buy. And we noticed that another club had been offering 10-year season tickets. And initially we thought, is that really a good idea? Because, you know, who's going to want to spend quite a bit of money on a 10-year season ticket? But we did. We worked out that at current rates, if we gave a sort of 40% discount, a 10-year season ticket would cost £1,950. Now, to me, that was a huge amount of money, but we sold 21 of them, and a number of them are to relatively elderly people who said, well, we probably won't see out our 10 years. So in effect, it becomes a really long-term valuable donation to the club. So I think it's an idea of coming up with a real raft of different things, ranging from something as low as £21. So if somebody wants to, you know, just spend something relatively small, they can do, to having some really decent large ones there, which, you know, you'd be surprised that may well get taken up.
We did, basically what you said there, almost echoes what we did at Hitchin. We were looking at other club sites to try and pinch the best ideas, as you always do. And we did the shirt idea. We did. We've got a history of the club book, which we sent out for a certain level of donation. The smallest level of donation got a letter from or an email from the club thanking them, signed by the chairman or the managing director. We did a £250 one where everyone went into the hat for the name of our main stand. That was very popular. The dugout sponsor, which was to say one family took for mother and father.
Wait, Roy, go back to that one. So did you say you did it was what, £250?
For the name of the main stand, for £250, your name went into a hat.
Right, okay.
And the winner actually chose to name it after a charity, as it turns out, rather than after himself, which I thought was very appropriate.
How long was that for? Like, to name that stand for? Was that for the season or permanently, or?
No, I can't remember if it's for 1 or 3 seasons. I can't remember off the top of my head now. But again, it wasn't something that was going to happen otherwise, and it created a bit of competition. It was drawn at a home game, so.
And was that a case of, though, with something like that? Did you have like a target in mind? You know,
not
like
at all. No, whatever.
An amount of tickets.
It wasn't something we thought we could easily sell anyway. So the more.
And so, Roy, just so again, it's more for the listeners listening in. With things like that, and you, Simon, with the ideas that you've just come up with, all the person does, they actually go onto the crowdfunder thing you've set up and actually donate there, or are we talking this is separate compared to what the crowdfunder is? Obviously, it makes it a lot easier.
No, it's all on the website to follow. It's very easy. It's not complicated at all. And again, our two gentlemen have set everything up so it's so easy for everyone.
Because just going back, as we all know with clubs, and I can only talk as when I've sort of started over at Thamesmead, is you come up with one of these ideas and Simon, you'll know, and someone go, oh, someone's got to do that. Someone's got to do it. So this is actually just taking all that away. So people can come up with these great ideas, and if you've got it set up, that is how easy it is.
Absolutely. I mean, it couldn't be easier, and there's no work for anyone other than when, you know, if I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example. You know, take the 10-year season tickets. The only work we did at the end of it was to arrange the printing of the tickets and send them out to the individuals.
Can I just caveat that to say it's very easy to set up a page. It's very easy to sort of take time to think about the rewards and do it through. But for have a successful crowdfunder, it is hard work. You do have to put it in, and both of these clubs and FROME and what Cheltenham have done, every single one of them, as I said at the start, I've got a team of 3 or 4 people behind it that are driving the campaign. So anyone that thinks they could just throw a page up and earn 20 grand in 28 days are nuts. It will not happen.
It's like anything in life. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So, you know, it does take some graft, yeah. And it probably, you know, takes a nice, you know, a couple of sparks and nice ideas too. You bring that together and it will work. But you don't need to get to the start line, as you were, with everything set and you just sort of let it go and then kind of watch it maybe not perform as well as you think. You can edit it and move it and evolve things. You can add rewards. You can take rewards down. You know, it's that.
Yeah, I refer to it as like the on Apprentice, when Alan, you did the market thing with Alan Sugar, and he says go and buy 5 items or whatever it is and see what sells. As soon as you realise the 3 that aren't selling, you take them off the site. You move them down, or take them less, and you bring in new things in. I mean, we had that with FROME, so we had about 6 or 7 rewards on there, of which we were all like, oh, they're pretty good. We put them out to the fans 2 days before we launched, and the fans just came back and said there was only one that they were going to buy, which ours was very similar. So it was a seat plaque. So to get your name on basically a sticker, not even like a proper plaque, but one of those stickers that the chair's going to break before the sticker breaks, and to get their name on the wall of thanks. And you think, well, those stickers were £1.50 to print per person. The board to go on the wall was what, 300 quid with everyone's names on. And where we gave it a kicker was that we were going to choose one of those people that bid it to name the stadium for the next year. So we did that as a draw. So it was £50. The cost to the club per person was about £2, £2.20. I think we had 320 donations to the campaign, of which 216 of those bought a plaque. So when you sort of think that's 216 times 50 quid, where most of them were coming on. So we were just celebrating the fact that anytime someone bought a plaque, we just went to town, thanked them on social media, thanked them everywhere we could, sent them a little note. So there was a lot of admin behind it to get that engagement, to make people celebrate it, and tagging 1,000,001 people into Facebook posts, because you were going, right, thanks, Keith, for your donation. And And then if it was someone that bought a plaque, it was like, okay, you've bought plaque number 25 so far. We've got 300 left to sell. And it gave us a new thing. And it's really hard to keep asking people for money, but it's actually really easy to celebrate the people that have donated towards it and thank them. So effectively, after you launch, it all becomes about how good you are at thanking people and how you are at keeping reminding people it's there without sort of going, come on, we just want your money. So yeah, it's a really interesting way to do it. But as I say, I wouldn't, if anyone's going to go into it blindly thinking they can just set up a page, copy someone else's, and they'll suddenly raise the same as that they'll fall very quickly out of love of it.
That's your social media presence that you're going to be more successful. And I say we were very lucky to have such a brilliant social media team. They really did drive it on. And as you say, having one person, it would overwhelm them. It really would. You do need a team.
That's one thing that has changed now, Roy, though, and as football, is that most clubs do have people that put a lot out on social media now. And, you know, even just things like as watching, you know, highlights of games. And I think, if I remember rightly, in this league, I think Bognor were one of the first to do that, what I remember doing when we played against them. But everything changes now, that everyone's got someone that tweets, everyone's got someone that does their website, everyone's got someone, you know, nowadays, because they have to stand there at matches, as you've all said, and do your sort of football webpage thing, or put your result out as goal scores are going in on Twitter. So most clubs have actually got them people there now anyway.
I think, you know, the two were right to not underplay that it isn't straightforward. You've got to work at it, and the more you put into it, the more you get out of that. I think it's important, people, you say, you don't just turn up, well, we've got a crowdfunding site, where's the money? You do have to work at it. I think that was the key that Scott and Murray were trying to get across.
I think that's where it becomes addictive, because, as I say, we always warn clubs before they start, get ready for your life to be sort of put on hold, warn your wife, warn your kids, whatever it is, that you're going to be a bit distracted for 28 days or however long you run your campaign for, because it does do that. And when you put the effort in and then suddenly you check the site and there's another $4,000 gone on or whatever it is, then it gives you that and your team that impetus to go, right, okay, what can we do next? What can we learn from it? And it is just a massive marketing campaign at its core. It's the most probably engaging marketing campaign you ever do, because you can see instant feedback. It's not just going, okay, well, we put a season ticket campaign together. Okay, if we sold many, what will we do? You're instantly seeing it minute by minute with money coming in or not, and seeing what works and what fails.
I think something that Roy touched on right at the beginning was the local rivalry aspect, and I think that can help. Rather like Royston Town, we're just down the road from Worthing, who did a crowdfunding campaign at pretty much the same time as us. And it wasn't intended, but it was amazing how the fans of both clubs suddenly got very, very competitive and were watching each other's performances, to the extent where they were constantly putting out messages saying they were going to beat the team down the road and so on and so forth. And I'm convinced that actually helped both sides generate money, because supporters were donating little bits of extra money to make sure that they were in front of the other side. You know, we kept leapfrogging each other.
Phenomenal. Both campaigns are phenomenal as well. I mean, you know, so I don't doubt that for a second. You know, I think that's true, Simon.
We know it's absolutely true, because obviously we know Worthing as well, and they were telling us we want to be Bognor, we want to be Bognor. But what we can also share, I won't name any names, is there was other clubs local in the area that were then almost a little bit too scared to come and start it, because they're thinking, oh my God, if these two have raised that much, we're going to get nowhere near. But I would just say to clubs that are looking at the sort of clubs that have made massive sales, say it's about what you need, it's about what you can get. Every club is slightly different, and $5,000 to one club is just as good as raising $60,000 for another club, depending on what you need it for and what you're doing. So every situation is unique. But what the crowdfunder tool does look like, and the page where you can see hundreds of examples. And I think going back, it was so long ago you asked the question, I think it was Keith, I'm going to remember, it was about 40 minutes ago, and said how many clubs have actually done it and how many clubs are looking to do it. Well, we can tell you that basically a third of EFL, so above the non-league pyramid, have done some form of crowdfunding. And then when you start to get into the national leagues and the Northern League, I think they said it was like 50% of their league had done a form of crowdfunding in the last sort of 12 months. And I think it's very similar in the Eastern and Southern League is exactly the same. So we're sort of seeing about half the clubs around the pyramid have done some form of crowdfunding, whether that's on our site or a donation site or even through their own personal website, where they've sort of taken it on themselves. I think one of the things that crowdfunder allows you to do above those ones is one, the rewards, the expertise that you're getting. Obviously, blow my own trumpet, but not just the coaches that are all the way through crowdfunder as a tool, because crowdfunder is not just a tool for football. It's not here just for that. It's here for every element of raising money. So there's 80, 90 people within the company that are dedicated to helping people make whatever their dream or whatever their plan or cause happen. So yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of ranging expertise, and depending on what you're doing, crowdfunder is very good at getting the right people in there. Whereas if you're doing it yourself for your own website, or you're just setting up thinking, well, that will save on fees or transaction fees or whatever it is that's through, then it's almost a bit of a false economy because you can't actually see it. And when we've had other people do ones where they're taking the money directly on the site, but seeing that total and seeing that totalizer go up is so inspirational to other people to get involved. And when people have talked about that spike at the end, I mean, I don't know how many people. Well, I'd love to hear Roy and Simon's stories, but I know at FROME, when it got down to that 19,980 or whatever it was, I had 5 or 6 people texting me or going through Facebook saying, I'm going to be the one that gives the 20 quid that gets over the 2,000. And realistically, as soon as we hit the 20,000, it stopped. But we got to 20,100 because all of those people were the person that wanted to be that one last donation. And all of those people have donated earlier on in their campaign as well. And what we're seeing now with a lot of clubs is, how do you actually start to look at that? So starting their crowdfunder potentially with less rewards to get those initial donations, but then after a week having a quiz night, or I think we saw the other day someone had a wine and cheese night, which we sort of bought in like £500-600, and they supplied the local company dropped off all the wine and cheese to the club, and people came in and obviously very socially safe, picked all their stuff up, and they had a virtual wine and cheese night. And you think, that's the same person that's donated 20 quid at the start, potentially, then £10 for a quiz night, £10, £15 for a cheese and wine night, and going through, and you start to think, well, all these little instances. And I think they started selling like glasses of gin glasses and beer glasses that could go along for the evening as well, that they were branding up. And it's just all sorts of craziness that, as long as the club are making profit, and I think that's where Mo and I would always go, because when we were firstly talking to clubs, and clubs cottoned onto it pretty well, because then they would start copying each other, which they have, which you've seen on this call, because we're talking about similar things, was you're not after a £25 polo shirt with the club badge on, because that'll cost the club 18 quid to do, and actually they're going to do it. Or offering season tickets or stuff like that. You don't want to steal the revenue that's to come. And although there's that concept that we've talked about in crowdfunder of paying it forward, of like saving pubs and restaurants and stuff like that, or hairdressers buying something in advance of using those services, the football clubs needed to bridge that gap, not to steal from future revenue. So avoiding things where you're going to basically bring money forward, but in 6 months' time you're going to have that problem because you've got no money there. That's not solving a problem. And Mo and I would sit here and, we'd be honest, we'd just be angry. I think more that a club's taken that route, because all you're doing is bringing forward your finance and not really solving the problem.
Well, I've got one good question, I suppose, the question that no one seems to have answered so far. Who won, Bognor or Worthy?
Well, I'm pleased to say Bognor.
Why do you think Peter's been quiet on the show questions, Dave?
Yeah.
To be honest, it's one of those classic cheesy things to say, but there was 2 very clear winners in that.
I was just going to say, really, it didn't matter who won, because both won.
Yeah, basically. It does matter, though.
Yeah.
I felt the same with Royston as well.
Was that the headline? We hammered Royston.
So with FROME, then you actually offer people to actually not buy their own seat, but name a seat in the ground as well.
Yeah. So that's what it was. Name your seat. Your name goes on the wall. And then, yeah, we drew it out of a hat to choose the winner. And I was sitting there, because I do the marketing for Frome, I'm praying for a 12, 13-year-old lad that's going to nickname the new ground something like the Pokemon Arena, something that will get us sort of national exposure. I spoke to, and luckily we got a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old that won, and I thought, yes, this is perfect. And I spoke to their father and I said, if they want to call it anything crazy, I said, even if you want to call it like the Gary Neville Appreciation Thunderdome or something, whatever you want to call it, we're absolutely fine. That as long as we get permission, we'll ring Gary Neville up or whatever it is, we'll get word for it. And I thought, right, this is it. They've done it. And they came back with a very traditional Robin's Nest, because that's what the old clubhouse used to be called. And I thought, oh no, how's a 13 and a 14-year-old played it so safe? But it's been embraced. Obviously, the fans will always refer to it as Badgers Hill, as the stadium. Unfortunately, prior to my time, the names, the club have sold the naming rights to that ground far too many times for anyone to remember how many names it's had. So, and that's something that the club has to deal with. But yeah, it'll always be affectionately known as Badgers Hill. But the kids have got it for another year now anyway. So
was that what you that came from the parents rather than the kids though?
No, it did. Well, the older one wanted to name it after a local charity, which obviously we would have been absolutely delighted to have done. And the other one, no, apparently he read about it online. He went through the club history and he saw it all and thought it was just nice. He questioned why it was Badgers Hill compared to, because obviously being Robins, like most teams around that area are called. Yeah, so I think he just sort of questioned why it was a Badger rather than obviously just being to do geographic location more than anything else. So yeah, it kind of came from that, really.
I must ask, is that a canary on your chest? Because are you a closet Hitchin fan there, or?
No, according to our fans, because we rebranded, it's actually a pigeon. But no, it's definitely a sporting.
It's a canary.
So with yourself then, so with that then, you charged, what did you say, it was 50 quid? Did you say to name your seat, and then you pulled it out of the hat from there to see who would then go forward to actually name the ground as well?
Yes, yeah.
So yours was 50 quid and Roy's was 250 quid.
No, that wasn't for a seat. That was just, it was basically for the main stand to be named after whoever won the draw. It was mainly firmsmen. There were some individuals did as well, but I'm say an individual won, but he's chosen a charity. So, in fact, I'm just waiting to put the story on it for a website, so the charity gets the recognition.
Yeah, I think the kit one's excellent with the name on the kit. I think
everyone's going
to, even, like you said, even clubs that only, like I said before, that you have the 70 or whatever. Even the youth teams, kids' names. I think that's a great show. Especially a lot of these kids make this, like a lot of teams now have like sort of bespoke kits made up for them every year, and all the way through the whole of the club as well. You can do that at every age. That's a very, very good idea.
How did you go about that, though, Simon? Was that something they had to do that before the season started, so you could get it put on the kit then, or?
Yes, I mean we trying to remember the dates now, but we set it up so that it was obviously before the season started, before we commissioned our new kit, and we're fortunate that the kit is white, a white top, green shorts, but the white shirt obviously shows up the wording, which from a distance you don't notice it. If you are watching the game in progress, unless you're quite close to the player, you wouldn't notice it. But if you're holding a shirt up in front of you, it's very clear. And the big benefit, which we hadn't really considered, but it's obvious when you think about it, that if you're going to the trouble of spending £21 to have your name embroidered on the shirt, you also want to buy a shirt. So just about everybody that did that bought a shirt, and a number of people have had them framed and hung up as souvenirs. So we really got a double whammy, and I think perhaps it comes back to what either Scott and Murray said earlier on. There's all sorts of ancillary spends that come as an added bonus.
How much did that actually cost the club, though, to get those embroidered on?
Nothing. No, that was within the cost of the production of the shirt. We have a very good shirt manufacturer who've been very supportive over the years. We told them what we wanted to do, and they did it at no cost, no extra cost to ourselves.
I think the important thing to say about the rewards generally is that you've basically got a blank piece of paper. Well, I say, like Bognor, we looked at what other clubs did, but you can come up with ideas of your own, and you can fit it to whatever level of donation there is. So you can be as, you can really be blasé. You can try anything really. And what'll work for one club won't necessarily work for another. So a reward you might think sounds a great idea won't necessarily attract your supporters to take it up. So you can be as creative as you like with your ideas for rewards. And of course, a lot of fans.
Oh, voice frozen down in Hitchin.
Oh, Simon, I've got a great idea for your club.
Oh yeah.
You could raffle off someone to be the vice chairman of the FA for a day.
Yes, yes, we tried it.
Well, you say that, Keith. So one of the things that we did for FROME when we were sort of getting near the end was we did 2 experiences, because one of the things that clubs have, that when you're on the board or when you're a manager or in the sort, you kind of forget the kind of privileges that you kind of have that the everyday fan doesn't do. So going in a boardroom or being in the dugout or going to training or whatever it was. So we sold 2 experiences. The first one was be a manager for a week, or be a coach for a week, sorry. So someone, and we put them both, because it was auctioned, we put them both on eBay and then just put the money into the crowdfunder afterwards. And we put them up there online. So the first one was be a manager, be a coach. So you came along to 2 training sessions, and then you could be in the dugout and in the dressing room during the game. And then pre and post game, we kind of did like a Sky Sports style interview with the person. And then at half time, we brought them on just to introduce them to the crowd. And ultimately that cost the club next to nothing. And the person that did it was perfect. We didn't have any issues or anything like that. And that raised 280 quid, I think it was, something like that, for someone paid for that experience. And then the other one was be a player for a week, which was a bit more of a gamble, should we say, when we were putting out there, because we didn't know if someone was going to win it, if they were going to be 13 or 95. So the premise behind that was that you would train with the team on 2 occasions, then come along for a match day. This was for pre-season friendly. And then you could go on, you could be part of the game depending on your skill set. So we kind of had it that if it was someone that was 18, 19, 20, that kind of area, then they might get sort of 4 or 5 minutes on the pitch if they felt comfortable, or however long. Or if it was that it was someone that was in their 70s, 80s, 90s, then we would sort of wheel them on at the end. Not wheel them on.
Wheel them on.
Really poor choice of words there. Come on.
Grindsman's happy.
You have to take like a penalty or something right at the end.
Oh, dear.
Again, I think that raised 250 quid. And I think a 17-year-old did it. And he lived something like 4 hours away. And he came down because his nan lived in the area, I think it was. So he came down to visit her, joined in. When it came to the pitch time, he said he didn't want to go on. Like onto the actual match. I think it was actually against Yeovil, so I'm quite pleased he wasn't going to do it. But at half time, we had a penalty shootout against the reserve goalkeeper, and obviously the crowd bought into it. And the crowd, we know we've all been at football. Normally, there's a lot of jeering towards anyone that's going to be taking the penalties, and a lot of not hostility, friendly hostility, should we say, to sort of hope they miss or whatever, that kind of thing. But this, because everyone knew what this kid had done, we'd shared his story in advance to say how far he travelled, how much money he'd paid for the experience and to help the club. It was just so welcome. The kid scored his goals, and he couldn't have had a better hero moment, you'd say.
I love stories like that.
Yeah.
But again, cost the club nothing.
Mm.
So,
and it shows you being creative with a new idea that probably other clubs hadn't thought of. So
I think that's a very good point. You know, we do forget sometimes how important or how valued those sort of experiences can be. And in retrospect, perhaps we should have come up with 1 or 2 of those sort of things ourselves.
I think that's so true. I mean, and when we say these campaigns drive meaningful fan engagement, I think this is exactly the sort of the example of it. When I did, I mean, we've done 5 or 6 campaigns at Cheltenham now, and we're seeing more and more clubs do repeat campaigns as they sort of see the value of it. And it's not just about going back out for more money; they just sort of see an opportunity to do something. And some of the biggest assets of the club is the manager and the players. And like what I was we created like a sort of coaching session for you know, young children to sort of join our club captain at the training ground. So we got an hour of his time, which doesn't cost the club anything or anybody anything, but he can come and join 20 kids who've paid, I don't know, they've pledged perhaps £25 to sort of join them. So that's a sort of 450 odd quid towards the campaign. But also those kids are now having a once in a lifetime opportunity to join the club captain and have an hour's football, you know, down at the training ground. You can do that with the manager, any of the players, some of the former players. We held a sort of legends game. So we just asked, well, what we found was former players were like, how can I help? What can I do? Well, some time would be great. Well, we'll get you all together. We put together a bit of a legends team, and we sort of made 11 places or 16 places available for fans to effectively play in that match, or as many. I think we had sort of 20 or 30 in the end, and everyone just had a sort of 20-minute run out against their heroes. And you know, and that brings everybody so close together. That's meaningful fan engagement. That's what I mean when I talk about it. Those money can't buy experiences. Only football clubs really can offer things like that. You know, that kind of.
I think you're right, Murray, because I think, you know, the one thing that all our clubs have had from day one, which we've always been able to do, is sell your one-day match sponsor. So it's either that the people come in and you look after them, you give them a beer in the boardroom, and they're the match day sponsor for that day. And I think most clubs at every level's managed to be able to do that quite easily because, as you said, it gives them that insight to seeing a little bit more than just a spectator. And yeah, you're right. There is a lot more like the issues the things you've just said that they would want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've seen loads of great examples of that, and it doesn't literally cost any money to create those things. It just requires a little bit of thinking, a little bit of a brainstorm. What have we got as a club? Let's ask somebody to sort of donate a bit of time, and yeah, we will generate a nice little chunk of money towards what we need. But that relationship, you're starting to create sort of more powerful bonds with your community, and that's kind of what that's what most clubs are sort of talk about. You know, it's quite often a bit of a marketing line to say, oh, we need to drive some good fan engagement. Well, those experiences, that's how I sort of got into the game in late 80s, but I'd sort of go into an after school club with a couple of, you know, strikers from Cheltenham Town, and here I am 40 years on, still sort of, you know, got that relationship with the club. So those things are really powerful in creating a new generation of support. And you know, they're also very good tools for crowdfunding.
With some of those ones like the naming rights and stuff like that you had, and the stand, etc., did you actually go to companies as well? Did you go to sort of some of the bigger companies to try and see if they'd buy a ticket for, like, you know, for 250 quid or for 50 quid or whatever? Did you actually go to these big companies as well and try and get stuff from them as well?
Tried, yeah, we did get it was mainly companies in the end who bought them, right? So you go wherever you can. When you're chasing money, it's funny how you get, I'm afraid. No opportunity should be wasted, and it's on social media, you're putting it out all the time. And so because our scheme lasted 6 weeks, you've got to keep the momentum going. You can't let it flag. You've still got to keep pushing it, even after the initial surge. So, you know, you do have to keep on top of it, which is, again, why you need that team, just to keep pushing each other along.
I think when you talk about those different things, so when someone's having that sort of reward like they did for 250 to name the stand, what actually that company's buying for that £250 is the social media shout out that they've pledged £250, because they're already winning by getting that, because they're seeing the engagement, because then people will like that post and say, oh, brilliant, thank you to X company for doing that. They're donating to the club and they're creating that association with the club. If they go on to win the stand, even better, but you're still getting all of those little touch points with those companies and people getting that exposure from it, and the reach that those posts get. That's kind of really what they're paying for it when you stop getting to the hard marketing of it. And what Roy was just talking about with the sort of the dips and the lows, Mo and I would always say that it kind of starts strong and ends strong, and it's how you mitigate that middle period. And it's not on all campaigns where you see a kind of lull in the middle, but it's really how do you do it? How do you structure something to keep people coming back to either being engaged with it or not? Because otherwise, the length in the middle. So if you run it for 4 weeks or you run it for 24 weeks, it's how long you want that middle bit to be bridged and what you can do what you can do in there. And typically what we've seen is to say, well, there's no real difference between running a campaign between 4 weeks and 10 weeks at all, or anything longer. All it does is just drag out that middle bit. And we know what football's like. Football's about stories. It's about watching Sky Sports News and having the sort of, oh, what's happened in the last hour. So if you drag something out over sort of 12, 16 weeks, the story becomes a bit boring, to be honest, in journalism terms and everything like that. You started it and then you can kindly get the journalist back at the end of it. So I think we would always say sort of look at between that 4 to 6 week period, depending on obviously what's happening in life. And if we've got Christmas Day in the middle of it or something like that, then look at the sort of timings and just think about when you set them up and when they're finishing, because there's nothing worse than a campaign that finishes on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. It's like, no, make sure you work with us and we can put it on so it finishes on a Sunday night at 10 o'clock and you've got that whole weekend to build up to it. Or if you're in a fortunate world where we're doing it and games are back on, because I think when games start back up, that's definitely not going to be the end of crowdfunding donations. People are going to really realise where this potentially can take them. And so mention the ideas here, like the kits and stuff like that. It's just such a winning idea where you can make a lot of revenue for something that wasn't a revenue pot before. And you're just making those new funds. So it's a fantastic way to do it.
I think also with that sort of it's all about the validation. So if you have a community that validates your crowdfunding campaign with pledges of money, the numbers going up, the targets going up, the buzz is going up, the appearances in the newspaper are going up. If you're managing to create those things, then that just simply improves your sort of commercial value almost, like the attractiveness of the club for local businesses to support, so that they want to be part of that. They don't, so that does attract new business into the club. So whether it comes in on actually during the campaign, well, it can do, and it has done. We've seen loads of examples of that. But actually, we've also seen conversations that continue beyond the campaign for new partnerships and opportunities. So it's that validation. It's not the money. It's not necessarily a story. All those things are great and brilliant, but it's the validation. You're proving the value of the club, as kind of Roy alluded to with that sort of really nice quote earlier. You're validating its importance in the community. That makes it commercially attractive. So that's this sort of idea of a more sustainable future, that if you can sort of keep that kind of engagement going, that community engagement through things like crowdfunding, then that's going to give you a brighter future, because that's going to be more interesting to commercial partners and new ones, or ones that have just gone away because they weren't necessarily looked after too well before, or don't perceive what their return on their investment is, however much that is. Now you're starting to demonstrate that you can prove that it's worth their time to be involved in it. But it's that hard work element. You still got to once you've onboard them, you need to look after them. But that's another conversation entirely.
I mean, one thing we found, I'm not sure how important crowdfunding was towards it, but at the time when non-league football was allowed crowds and Football League, Premier League weren't, I reckon our crowds were about 30% up compared to what we'd have anticipated in that period. Now, this was at the time after our crowdfunding campaign, so I've got no doubt that would have helped. Obviously, we did attract Football League and Premier League fans who had nowhere else to go. But as I say, the fact that we'd become newsworthy through the crowdfunding wouldn't have done us any harm there. And to see our crowds up by that percentage, well, we weren't doing any better. We weren't top of the table or anything. So it wasn't purely results driven. We were improving towards the end, but definitely we had more bodies coming through the gates. So,
you reminded people you were there, quite
absolutely,
simply.
yeah.
I think one area we haven't really talked about is it goes back to what the core of crowdfunding is there's two ways you can set up a crowdfunding campaign. One is what I believe all of us, well, maybe not Murray on this call, we set up this the product's called flexible funding, where they basically keep what you raise. So you ask to raise 20 grand, and if you raise 15 grand, that's what the club keeps. But there is another option of the all or nothing, which is, as it says on the tin, you set your target, and if you don't reach the target, the money just goes back to everyone that's donated. So it gives you a real chance to validate something. So whether or not you've got an idea, as I don't know, something like you want to make a quiz book or something like that for the club, and you think, well, we need to sell 100 copies of this quiz book to make it worthwhile, you could do that, put it on there for £10 and say, right, once we sell 100 copies, we'll write the quiz book and we'll print it and we'll make it. And then once it's done, you'll get it sent to you. And that just goes into kind of like what people would see as a kind of original crowdfund type idea, where the crowd are funding that idea to happen. And I genuinely think we'll see more and more of that within football, with people saying, well, if you want it at the club, we'll start one, and if there's enough people that want it, we'll do it. And I think that's where the future will come in as well.
I mean, there is a temptation with those two options to sort of go, well, I'll just do the keep what you can get, because that's obvious. If we don't hit our target, I can keep the bit of money we have raised. But we know that projects that set all or nothing targets raise far more money, and that's because the community recognise that everyone has to come together, and you kind of create ambassadors for the club by doing it. So if you're aiming for 25 grand and your core fans have got you to about, say, 10 grand, then they're going to start shouting. They're invested in your success as much as you are, so they're going to start shouting about what you're doing, and that's going to sort of encourage greater sort of support. I think there's a little bit of maths that 5% of everybody you can reach in terms of social media, press, will make a pledge of around 50, average of 50 quid. So the more people you can get engaged, fighting on your behalf with boots on the ground, if you like, I think that's the better way to do it. So I would always encourage everybody to sort of go for an all or nothing target. Yes, there's an element of jeopardy, and the night before you launch, you sort of panic a little bit. But if you put the work in, it will be okay. It will be okay.
And Murray, again, just for people that are listening, like again, treasurers, secretaries, and chairman, is this sort of the money's raised? Does this have to go through the club's books, the accounts? Do they have to pay tax on it, or is it all because it's donations and is it all tax free?
Yes, it's all tax-free, and it will go into the account that has been added by the person who created the account. There's anti-fraud measures within the business that we need to identify the owner of the bank account when you create the campaign. But that has been created by using the club bank details before, and it's been sort of validated by, or verified, I should say, by the ID of somebody at the club, whoever's kind of associated with the account. So it's totally tax free, because in effect they're donations, and you're just thanking people with a name on a wall or a name on a shirt or whatever that be, or enter into a prize draw. So yeah, that's totally it.
I think with that as well, that's the clear thing. So when you're making it look less transactional, because a plaque doesn't cost 50 quid. Do you know what I mean? Ultimately, everyone in the world knows that. Whereas if you're doing a polo shirt, 25 quid, polo shirts can cost 25 quid. So if you're looking at the tax man or anything like that, that just looks like a purchase. So yeah, it still needs to be very clear. And obviously the terms on Crowdfunder and where we work with all the clubs is very clear that you're making a donation and they're rewarding that donation, not making a transactional purchase.
Good.
Well, it's great stuff there. I mean, for clubs. I mean, are you surprised that more clubs don't take it up? I mean,
Yes.
I've been listening to you guys. It just feels like a little bit of a no-brainer to me.
I think that's definitely how I think, but I'm not surprised either that more people don't do it, because I think where me and Scott, like we kind of, because we're within the game. Yes, we're sort of like, we're part of Crowdfunder, but we kind of spend all of our time at our clubs, and so I think we get it. We get what it's like from a lot of people, at clubs. And I know plenty of skeptics, and in my own example, we've now run 7 or 8 crowdfunds. We've raised, I think, in total around, and Cheltenham Town, we're in League 2, but we're still a small club. We're doing all right at the moment, but we're a small club, and we've raised sort of 170,000 pounds in 7 or 8 campaigns, because there's now a culture of it that people now turn around and say, come on, we can go and do that, can't we? We need 10 grand for that. We'll go and do it. And that's great. But right at the start, nobody believed in any of it and it takes a lot of work to sort of convince people to give it a go. So I'm not surprised more people haven't done it, but I totally agree. I mean, you know, we've now seen hundreds of examples in the last sort of 12 months alone, be it at Sunderland or Wigan on a bigger scale, or sort of further down, sort of, you know, to a Bognor or a Hitchin. If it pound for pound, those are more successful, those campaigns, you know, to sort of be generating in the region of £60,000 at, you know, that you know, further down the sort of pyramid is far more impressive than Wigan raising sort of 900 grand over 2 campaigns in a bid to sort of save the club. You know, that is more impressive down below. So yeah, I think from our point of view, you know, we like to sort of we like to talk about it. We talk about it for hours and hours. And here we are on a Monday night, still talking about crowdfunding. We've been doing it all day, but and so it's, you know, it's quite powerful. But I think it's normally clubs that see other clubs, sometimes near to them or in their division, doing something, and that's when the spark of the idea starts to come out. I think we just, you know, I think more and more people are seeing it now.
So if I'm a secretary, then sort of looking to start one up and get in contact, Murray, with yourself, you know, or Scott. I mean, how do they go about it?
We have. Well, I would sort of encourage anyone to sort of, in the first instance, have a look at what we've been doing in football, and you can see that at crowdfunder.co.uk/football. If you go to that page, you'll be able to see a whole range of clubs from the Championship, like Scott said, a third of VFL, and hundreds of others down into grassroots clubs. You can see all those examples and how they've done their campaigns there. You can see some press articles. You can see the story. So I'd have a look there, have a look at what we're doing. You'll find a club that's comparable to you, whoever's watching this. And then I would say drop us a line. I think we got an email address, football@crowdfunder.co.uk. But you can find us you'll find us on Twitter. If you give us a look.
We'll put all this on our Facebook and Twitter page, Dave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're open for a chat. We're happy to sit down whenever.
You're welcome to use, say, the letter I wrote. If any club wants to see it as a sort of a proof that it worked for us, I'm happy for you to share that with other clubs.
Yeah, thank you.
You had a wonderful story that was written up, weren't you, on your website as well, on the Hitchin website, about the experience. And I think it was headline 61,000 reasons to be cheerful to be a Hitchin fan. That was my sort of take on it, and I just gave the whole story from beginning to end because I thought it was a great story, really.
Those things are so more powerful than me and Scott could spend all day on Zoom tomorrow talking to clubs, but there's nothing more powerful than reading something like what was on the website, you know, because it becomes real then, and I think that inspires people to believe it's real. It's easy for me and Scott to almost be like salesmen and tell you how good it is, but you need to hear the from the horse's mouth. And so I would encourage people to go and read that piece on the Hitchin website. And you know,
I'm not a percentage from crowdfunders to big you up, so I'm just doing it because, as I say, it was just so incredibly successful for us.
We genuinely believe that the clubs can sort of, you know, really, it can be a bit of a sea change in thinking, like the thinking about how to go about business at clubs. It can change the way people approach what they're doing, you know, and in the process, they can create some stories, some engagement, and generate a bit of money as well. It's great. I think it can create a sort of slightly different mindset at clubs once they sort of they see how powerful it can be, and you know, and that'd be a great legacy. I think that's, you know, that would be an amazing legacy.
And I mean, we've played, say, with Bognor, Simon. I mean, if there was something else that you needed, and you know, in the near future, I mean, is this something that you'd go back to again?
Well, it's interesting. I think the whole evening has helped re-innovate me to a certain extent, because I, up till now, had thought that the campaign that we did last year was very successful. That was great. But I hadn't really envisaged us moving forward, certainly for some time to come, onto another one. But listening to some of the stories I've heard makes me think that, you know, it probably should become part of our culture on a regular basis, maybe one a year or every 18 months or whatever. And there's always something that can be done to improve your facilities.
Exactly.
And, you know, it wouldn't be difficult to find one or two objectives that would justify another crowd. We may do it in a completely different way with, perhaps putting a lot more of the experience type of events into the offering. And I like the idea of, the all or nothing type of campaign. I think if we did it again, it would be right to do it in a different way, or a slightly different format, just to keep people's interests involved. But certainly, I think my my thoughts have changed a little bit as we've gone through the evening, because I've realised there are more opportunities and possibilities than perhaps I'd considered.
Well, you can do, like I said, Simon. It's not all about what people might think, that you're just draining your fans. You could actually, after, like, you didn't want to do one straight away, but you could actually do something for the fans, a crowd raiser thing for them. Even if it's like improving your videos of game, or they can get them for free, or an area for them, or you're building them something. It is, you're throwing it back to them as well. It does open up a lot more avenues for the club.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. I mean, there's always facility projects. So we've sort of seen it. Newquay at the moment, they're looking at their dugouts at the moment. Other clubs are getting defibrillators in. Others are sort of doing up the bar, just doing that up a little bit, because that will generate more money. So you're using money to generate money through new bar facilities. So we're sort of seeing those incremental kind of improvements. But you're right. There's also the thing like fan areas, fan zone. I've seen, I'm thinking of doing one again at Cheltenham, where I'm going to look for a few £1,000s to create some sort of heritage boards that go on in the concourse. So, even just sort of nice big vinyl stickers that bring out some character in the ground. That's only a few £1,000s. I'd be able to, I think we'd crowdfund that in hours, but all of a sudden I'd have £2,500 that the club would never give me. And I could just go and improve the concourse. And that would be great for the fans, because they can be proud of the ground. But also, something else I'm seeing now is clubs are actually, or supporters of clubs are working together with their community trusts to generate money for, actually not for the club at all, for local charities. Because, there is an important thing that clubs are important to people and supporters, but actually they are centres, they're hubs, community hubs. And that people are taking on a great responsibility to sort of support local charities, because there's, they are struggling too. And in a way that kind of reinforces a bit of identity around what clubs are and what maybe they could be doing. I mean, it's not a non-league example, but the EFL finals the weekend before last, all 4 finalists used that platform to do a virtual ticketing thing. And, collectively they've raised about £280,000 for local charities. Sunderland being the biggest example of that, but Tranmere did well. Portsmouth raised a nice chunk, and Salford did a bit as well. So none of that money went to the club. They actually just sort of used their platform just to do some good, and that's really great. I mean, the club's got behind it. In Sunderland's case, they're a huge club, absolutely massive club. But, they've had their problems down the years, and they just, they got to the position where they're sort of rotting in League One, unfortunately. But, in a matter of weeks, they've created this huge community where the city is absolutely taken over by this virtual ticketing scheme. There's a real sense of togetherness in that city. All of a sudden, they've gone to Wembley. They finally won a trophy after sort of 9 attempts since 1973. And they've just got a new owner too. And just all of a sudden, it's a massive line in the sand. And their momentum could sort of now achieve promotion, that there's this sense of togetherness. And they could go on, and they could get back to the Prem. Anyway, leaving Sunderland alone, that idea that communities can find some togetherness and a common cause, and actually realise that they need to work together. If they want to do it, everybody can play a part in that. So it doesn't matter whether you're Hitchin Town or you're Sunderland or you're Wigan or you're Cheltenham Town. It doesn't matter. The scale of it is irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter how much money you need to raise, how big a club you are. It's just about sort of getting behind the things that matter to you, like the football club. That's the important thing.
I mean, I was just busy. I was just tweeting out your website addresses on the thing. But I mean, it just seems so fantastic. I mean, going into it from the beginning, how did it all come about for you guys? So we've heard how people use it, but how did the idea of crowdfunder sort of come to pass in the first place?
It's a long and winding road. The core team of the core team, of which I guess I'm one of them. We've been working together since the late 90s. We've got a background in TV, and we initially worked on the first few series of Big Brother when it wasn't the big horrible monster that it is now, when it was a sort of groundbreaking experimental TV show. And that led us into sort of this sort of new sort of evolving world of digital media and TV. That led us to Channel 4 and with a program called River Cottage with Hugh Fernley-Whittinstall. And do you like it?
Fantastic program. Yeah.
So we all moved across to Devon to sort of work on that. And what we did with Hugh was develop campaigns. So we developed campaigns where we engage people to kind of like to sort of achieve like mass behavioural change. So we sort of challenged, chicken welfare quality standards, and one of our bigger ones was Hugh's fish fight, where we wanted to change the law in Brussels around discarding, throwing dead fish overseas because you fish too many and you're only allowed to land so many. Anyway, through that work, we generated a couple of million supporters. So we had the email addresses of people who wanted to do things positively to improve the world, basically. But very quickly, you realise that no one can do anything because they haven't got any money. So we've decided to build a crowdfunding website on the side and basically turned around to the 2 million people and said, right, we've achieved some great things together. We've changed the law. Supermarkets are now sort of taking notice of our sort of concerns around chicken welfare. So actually, why don't you just all break off into your communities, raise a little bit of money and go off and do something of your own? So we sort of just tried to create a platform that enabled people to do it. And that was about 10 years ago. And it's gone all right since. The business has grown quite well. Just today, we've launched a campaign with UNICEF to basically try and help 2 billion people worldwide get their vaccines. So it's, our campaigns have grown and grown and grown. Me and Scott just hide in the corner because we're football fans. We just created a little bit in the side, a little bit in the corner where we support football clubs. We've got a big partnership with Sport England where we channel so far almost 2.5 million quid into grassroots sports projects, not just football. And we're looking to grow that too. We're looking to sort of attract more partners into this to support the crowd in what they want to do. So that's where we are. Sorry, that's my life story. You didn't really need to know that.
I can say just to on the end of that, I think the last sort of 12 months where the sort of size and magnitude of what crowdfunder works towards, as Murray's just detailed, it's allowed us to go to sports teams, so not just football, but onto sport. And people always say, well, where do you make your money then? Because if you're offering the platform for free, you're offering this advice for free, you've got people like me and Murray and other coaches helping out. Where are you making money from? That's not why we did this for football. The reason why we did it for football was what Murray said was to help people get out of it. So once the coronavirus and all the pandemic started, it was like, how can we help? So Crowdfunder went fee-free across the whole platform for all of the projects that were trying to, or companies, businesses, pubs, restaurants, whatever, that was trying to survive through this lockdown period. And that was something that the CEO and Murray and the board and that took on at Crowdfunder to say, well, that's our principles, that's what we stand towards. And that's been so beneficial to Crowdfunder because more people have come to the platform, for one, but two, they can see that it's a company that are built on trying to help. And I think that's really clear in the culture of Crowdfunder, that it's about helping and just doing whatever we can to make it happen. And we're fortunate that Murray and I have been able to sort of sit there on the side and still convince all the other directors that sport and football should still be free on the platform. And that's what we continue to do just at this moment until we can sort of make sure that all the clubs are benefiting from it, because it's just, we've got to keep these communities together. And as I said at the start, that football clubs are at the heart of that.
It sounds like you're doing a fantastic, well, from what I've seen tonight, it looks like you guys are doing an absolutely fantastic job.
So kind.
Well, let's hope other clubs watching, Dave, now will not be scared of it, because I think that is the thing. I think you're worried and you're sitting there thinking, we're not going to be able to do that, and have listened to the stories of what they said and do want to commit, because there are a lot of hard-working people at clubs that that always sit there, and the main thing that they always talk about is how they get funding.
Mm.
Just to sort of come in on that and re-emphasize the point that any club that hasn't done it yet, who wants to get advice from Scott or Murray, you know, it's amazing how easy that, not easy, but easy to understand that advice is, and helpful that advice is to help somebody who's just starting get off the ground.
Mm. And I must admit, while you've been talking as that, I've been posting stuff out, and I've also been sending messages to my CEO of my football club as well at the same time. So I must admit, he's literally just got back to me. So
well, I'm going to be scouting around, Dave, looking for the clubs that are doing this. You could be a manager for a week. It could get me back in.
Well, Salford have just made a change, haven't they?
Well, it's Chelsea beat them on Saturday.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
So, having a good season, Murray, aren't you?
An unbelievable season. It's never been this good. So yeah, top of the league, 10 games to go, and one of the only teams in Europe to give Man City a game this season. So yeah, I'll take that.
It's that centre forward you got that I know well.
Who's that? Alfie.
Yeah.
How do you know Alfie?
Well, Alfie's obviously come from this way. He obviously played for VCD. I was the manager after, to be fair, but I've known Alfie when he was at Youth and Belvedere and Corinthian as well. So yeah, he's done ever so well for himself. He's I've liked the character he showed when he come from Doncaster to yourself. I think it's been brilliant.
Yeah, he's one of those great characters that bring as much off it as on it. And unfortunately, obviously, without support, I mean, that's the great irony, is that, you know, we almost beat Man City and could win the league, and there isn't going to be a supporter that sees it. And it sort of makes me feel sick just thinking about it, really. But Alfie's one of those characters that just brings the fans and the fans and the players and the club together. He's a great character, and yeah, he's great. He's grabbing the goals too, so you know he's had a good time with us. You know, he got the goal against City too, unbelievable moment. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, a few local people cheered that, but obviously with all of you as well, we're coming to sort of the end of the show. But are you looking forward now to the sort of pre-season coming in, and hopefully you can get your clubs back on track and actually have that interaction with the fans and the players?
Definitely. I think what we're focusing on is how the bigger clubs can still help. And I think that every club is going through something difficult. But for Frome's instance, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, if Bristol City or Bristol Rovers are listening and they wanted to send an under-23s team down in June to come and play a friendly, we'll sell 1,000 tickets, and that'll sort the club out for the summer. Do you know what I mean? That's the power of what these clubs can do still. And I think that's the next exciting stage for me, is saying, well, where can clubs look at all these things? Because there's still a huge void of money that people need to fill, and they've got to use the initiatives and their partnerships and their relationships to make it happen. So I think that's what I'm excited to see what sort of happens. But yeah, if you see Bayern Munich coming to Frome, you know I've won. But yeah.
I think that's a very good point, isn't it? Because I suppose every club finds its own level, and to a certain extent every club relies on bigger clubs to help them to a certain extent. But at our level of non-league, getting a decent pre-season friendly against a local, it have to be local, but a decent league side can make a hell of a difference. We've got a very good relationship with Portsmouth because they're only 20 miles down the road, and we're a bit nervous because Portsmouth have literally in this last week changed their manager, but yeah, and therefore you never know whether the incoming manager might have a different philosophy in terms of pre-season friendlies. But generally,
he definitely, I can tell you, Simon, Danny definitely won't, because he's obviously, I've known obviously Danny was at Concord Rangers in the Islington when he's come through, so Dan's a good lad. He's been on that show a few times.
His time at Concord as well, and we were delighted to hear that, because for exactly the reasons you mentioned, and rather like you mentioned at Frome, Scott, I mean, the benefit of us seeing Portsmouth, we didn't play them last season because we were rebuilding the stand and the pitch wasn't available. But the season before, you know, we had on a Tuesday night, I think 2,400, and apart from what's that? It's sort of 10 quid or so to come in. That's £24,000. But that night we took £9,000 in the bar, and you're absolutely right. That sort of money is a phenomenal support for you to start the season. You know, if only clubs at our level had those sort of games, if they could rely on their local football league side to give them that sort of support, it would make a hell of a difference to us all.
I think hopefully though, Simon, that we won't need a football game. As soon as you open your bar, you might make that £9,000 straight away.
Yeah, we can't rely on £9,000 every week, but still.
Well, listen, guys, it's been fantastic having you all on tonight. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic night, and it's been great to talk to everybody. And of course, Murray, if you could, spread the word a little bit to Alfie, and maybe we might be able to get him on the show. That'd be fantastic.
Oh, I'm sure he would. He's enjoying himself since the Man City game. He's done a lot. So yeah, I'll ask him.
Yeah, that'd be fine. That would be great. Thank you. And listen, guys, me and Keith, we'd like to say thank you to everybody that's been on tonight. And as I said, to Simon, to Roy, to Scott, and to Murray, it's been a fantastic night. And hopefully, you guys out there will take these guys up on this crowdfunding, because it seems to me to be a complete no-brainer and a cracking way to get some money into your club as well. But a big thank you to everybody for watching tonight. Me and Keith will be back next week, and on Friday night, of course, the Effing Bag show's back. We have got two lovely physios going to come and join us, as well as, of course, Emily, Ali, and of course Courtney as well. So come and join us for that. That should be quite good. It's going to be a little bit like Charlie's Angels on Friday night, but it'll be a good one anyway, I dare say. So until then, from me and Keith, and from the rest of the people tonight, good night.
Yeah.